Under the blood moon's merciless gaze, a single drop of crimson traced the curve of her throat like a lover's fatal promise. Ilara stumbled through the frozen labyrinth of the whispering peaks, her bare feet numb against the jagged ice that clawed at her soles. The wind howled like the ghosts of betrayed kin, whipping her tattered gown into ragged banners that snapped against the night. She was no longer the princess of shadowed spires, heir to the eternal thirst of her vampiric lineage. No, that title had been stripped away in the grand hall of obsidian thrones, where her father's council had declared her tainted, unworthy. "A curse upon our blood," they had whispered, their eyes gleaming with the cold calculation of survival. Her crime. A fleeting mercy toward a captured wolf-shifter from the rival alpha clans. A momentary hesitation that exposed her to whispers of weakness in a court where power was measured in veins, drained dry. Now, exile. Banished to the borderlands where the mountains bled into the endless white expanse, left to wander until the frost claimed her or the wild things did. The air tasted of iron and pine, sharp as the betrayal that still burned in her chest. She clutched the amulet at her neck, a heirloom of blackened silver, its central ruby pulsing faintly with the stolen life it had once held. It was her only remnant of home, a symbol of the blood that bound her kind, now a mocking weight against her skin. The moon above, bloated and red, seemed to mock her too, its light spilling over the snow like spilled vitae, illuminating the tracks of her flight. Erratic, desperate, leading nowhere. Her breath came in shallow gasps, fogging the air before crystallizing into fleeting diamonds. The cold seeped into her bones, a slow poison that dulled the eternal hunger she had always suppressed. As a vampire princess, she was meant for silken crypts and the warm pulse of thralls, not this barren wilderness where the wind carried the distant uive of wolves. Those primal beasts her people despised, yet envied for their raw, moon-kissed fury. Ilara's mind reeled with the faces of her betrayers, her father's stern visage, etched with the lines of centuries, the high priestess, whose chance had sealed her doom under the guise of divine will. "The Deusa demands purity," she had intoned, but Ilara knew the truth. It was fear. Fear of her growing empathy, her refusal to partake in the raids that left alpha villages smoldering, their leaders' throats torn in ritual hunts. She collapsed against an outcrop of ice-sheathed rock, the stone biting into her palms like accusatory fangs. Tears froze on her lashes, unspoken grief for the life she had never truly wanted but could not escape. What was strength, if not the will to drink deep of the world's cruelties? Her people thrived on it, their eternal nights a tapestry of conquest and shadowed alliances. Yet Ilara had always felt the pull of something softer, a lunar whisper urging compassion amid the bloodlust. That whisper had doomed her. Now, alone in the howling void, she wondered if the Deusa had forsaken her entirely, or if this was the trial foretold in the ancient scrolls, the path of the rejected, where exile forged or shattered the soul. The wind shifted, carrying a new scent, musk and earth, laced with the metallic tang of fresh blood. Ilara's senses sharpened, her vampiric instincts flaring despite the cold's numbing embrace. She lifted her head, scanning the moonlit drifts. Shadows moved in the distance, silhouettes against the silvered peaks, too deliberate to be mere beasts. Her heart, that traitorous organ she had long learned to ignore, quickened. Were they hunters from her court, come to ensure her end? Or something worse, the alpha packs, prowling the borders for intruders like her? She pressed the amulet to her lips, its ruby warm against the chill, as if it held a fragment of the life she had spared. That wolf shifter, chained in the dungeons, his eyes fierce with defiance rather than fear. She had slipped him a vial of her own blood, not to bind him, but to heal, a forbidden act that blurred the lines between predator and prey. Now, that mercy echoed in her veins, a quiet rebellion against the fate thrust upon her. A low growl rumbled through the night, closer now, vibrating the snow beneath her. Ilara rose unsteadily, her gown tearing further on the rocks, exposing skin pale as fresh-fallen white. The moon watched impassively, its red hue deepening as if feeding on the unfolding drama. She would not cower. If death came, it would find her standing, the amulet her talisman against the dark. But as the shadows coalesced into form, a lone figure emerging from the tree line, broad-shouldered and cloaked in fur, his breath a visible plume, Ilara felt an inexplicable pull. Not fear, not hatred, but a curiosity laced with dread. He moved with the grace of a predator, yet there was a hitch in his step, a wound dragging at him. Blood stained the snow in his wake, dark and steaming. An alpha, she realized with a chill that had nothing to do with the cold. One of their kings, perhaps, marked by battle or curse. Their eyes met across the frozen expanse, his golden ferrule under the moon. Hers, a stormy violet that held the depth of forgotten crypts. In that instant, the world narrowed to the space between them, the wind falling silent as if the Dusa herself held her breath. He was broken. She could sense it. The weight of guilt clinging to him like frost. And she, the exiled princess, felt the first stirrings of a connection she could not name. Instinctive, denied. Born from the shared language of the wounded. The amulet at her throat warmed, its ruby glowing faintly, as if awakening to the blood that might yet bind them both. The alpha staggered forward, his fur-lined cloak parting like storm clouds to reveal the ruin beneath. A gash across his ribs, deep and ragged, seeping blood that stained the snow in erratic crimson petals. Ilara's fangs ached involuntarily, the scent coiling through her senses like a siren's call, warm, vital, laced with the wild essence of pine and fury. She should flee or strike first. Her kind had spilled enough of their blood in the shadowed wars that pitted eternal night against moonlit packs. Yet she remained rooted, the amulet's ruby pulsing against her skin as if echoing the frantic rhythm of his labored breaths. He was no ordinary shifter. The breadth of his shoulders spoke of command, the scars etching his exposed arms like ancient runes of battles won and lost. His eyes, that molten gold, locked onto hers with an intensity that pierced the veil of her exile's despair. In them, she saw not the savage hunger of her people's tales, but a storm-tossed sea, guilt churning beneath the surface, a king's burden etched in every furrow of his brow. Thorn, she would later learn his name was, Alpha King of the Iron Fang clans, heir to the Whispering Peak's frozen throne. But in this moment, under the blood moon's watchful eye, he was merely a wounded beast, drawn by the same inexorable pull that held her fast. Who? What are you? His voice rasped like gravel under boot, low and commanding even in pain, carrying the timbre of distant thunder rolling through the peaks. He halted a dozen paces away, his hand pressing against the wound, fingers slick with his own lifeblood. The wind tugged at his cloak, revealing more. A circlet of blackened iron woven into his dark hair, tarnished by frost and forgotten oaths. Blood dripped from his side, steaming faintly in the chill, and Ilara's throat tightened with the forbidden urge to taste it, to heal or to claim. A ghost of the night, she whispered, her voice barely audible over the wind's mournful sigh. Fear coiled in her belly, sharp as the ice at her feet. But curiosity bloomed alongside it, warm and treacherous. She had been taught to despise them, the alphas with their primal howls and pack loyalties that mocked the solitary elegance of vampiric courts. Yet this one moved with a grace born of restraint, not savagery, his gaze searching her face as if she were a riddle carved in moonlight. The amulet warmed further, its glow seeping through her fingers, a silent warning or invitation, she could not tell. He took another step, then winced, dropping to one knee in the snow. The impact sent a fine powder rising like spectral mist, and Ilara's instincts warred within her. "Run!" her survival screamed. The borderlands were no place for mercy, especially not toward an enemy whose kind had raided her people's fringes, leaving pyres of ash in their wake. But the memory of that chained wolf in the dungeons flooded back, the defiance in his eyes mirroring this alpha's now. She had spared one then. Could she turn from another bleeding out before her? Instinct propelled her forward before reason could chain her. She closed the distance in a blur, her vampiric speed a whisper against the wind, kneeling beside him with hands outstretched but hesitant. Up close, the heat radiating from his body was a furnace in the frozen night, chasing away the numbness in her limbs. His scent enveloped her, earth and blood and something deeper, like the hidden fire beneath glacial crust. "You're dying," she said, more statement than question, her violet eyes tracing the wound's jagged path. It wept freely now, the metallic tang sharp enough to stir her hunger, yet she pushed it down, focusing on the flicker of pain in his golden stare. Thorn's lip curled in a snarl, but there was no malice in it, only wariness, and beneath that, a flicker of recognition. "And you, reek of the shadow courts, vampire." The word was a curse and a question, his breath fogging between them. He shifted, muscles rippling under fur and flesh, but made no move to attack. Instead, his gaze dropped to the amulet, the ruby's light reflecting in his pupils like a captive star. "That mark. It's no trinket for the wilds." She clutched it tighter, the silver biting into her palm. It was her bloodline seal, forged in the heart of volcanic crypts, said to hold the essence of the Deuce's first thirst, a drop of eternal life stolen from the dawn. To him, it must symbolize everything his clans had fought against, the undead hunger that drained the land's vitality. "It's mine," she replied, voice steady, despite the tremor in her core. The connection hummed between them, unspoken and electric, like the first crack of lightning before the storm. She felt it in the way his pulse called to hers, not as prey, but as equal, a denied pull that terrified her more than any blade. The wind howled anew, carrying the faint weavos of distant packs, a reminder that they were not alone in this forsaken expanse. Thorn's hand shot out, gripping her wrist with surprising gentleness for one so broken. His touch burned, skin to skin, sending a jolt through her veins that blurred the line between fear and longing. "Why help? Your kind would sooner drain me than save." Alara met his eyes, the curiosity winning over dread. In his gaze, she saw her own exile reflected. A king hunted by his own shadows, perhaps betrayed by allies in the endless games of power that pitted their worlds against each other. "Because the Deusa whispers of trials," she murmured, the words slipping out like a confession. "And yours. Calls to something in me I cannot name." He released her, but the bond lingered, invisible threads weaving through the cold air. The amulet's glow intensified, casting ruby shadows on the snow, as if the blood within approved. Thorn rose slowly, offering a hand not in dominance, but alliance, fragile, instinctive, born of shared wounds under the unrelenting moon. Alara hesitated, the weight of her people's hatred pressing down, yet she placed her palm in his, the warmth seeping into her frozen heart. Together, they turned toward the shadowed tree line, where safety or doom awaited. The night deepened, the blood moon bearing witness to the spark of something forbidden, a connection that promised redemption or ruin. And now, I invite you to leave a trace of your presence in the comments. Tell us where in the world you're watching from, and the exact hour you hear this story. We wish to know how far these northern confessions travel, and at what moments of the night they find you. The tree line swallowed them like a lover's secret embrace, branches clawing at the sky under the blood moon's crimson veil. Ilara's hand lingered in Thorn's for a heartbeat longer than necessary, the heat of his skin a stark rebellion against the frost that had claimed her for so long. She pulled away, the absence of his touch leaving a phantom warmth, but the connection hummed in her veins, a silken thread woven from instinct and unspoken peril. The amulet at her throat pulsed steadily now, its ruby a beacon in the encroaching dark, as if the blood within it recognized the Alpha's essence, stirring memories of ancient pacts long sundered. They moved in tandem, his limp dictating a halting rhythm that echoed the uneven beat of her exiled heart. The snow crunched beneath their steps, each one a fragile pact against the wilderness. Thorn led her deeper into the pines, where the wind's howl softened to a murmur, carrying the faint, acrid scent of smoke, distant fires, perhaps the remnants of border skirmishes that had scarred these peaks for generations. "There's a hollow ahead," he rasped, his voice a low rumble that vibrated through the chill air. "Old watchpost from the clan wars. It'll shield us till dawn." His golden eyes scanned the shadows, ever the king's vigilance, even as blood seeped through the hasty binding she'd fashioned from a strip of her gown. The fabric, once fine silk from her quartz looms, now stained with his life, bound them in a way words could not. Ilara nodded, her violet gaze flickering to the wound. She had pressed her palm to it briefly, willing her vampiric essence to stem the flow, not feeding, but mending in the forbidden way she had learned from shadowed tomes. The act had drained her further, the cold gnawing deeper into her core, but it had bought him time. Why? The question coiled in her mind like frost on a window pane. Her people would call it treason. This aid to an alpha whose kind had spilled vampiric blood in retaliation for raids that left villages as frozen tombs. Yet in his pained silence, she saw echoes of her own shame, the mercy that had branded her weak, unworthy of the eternal throne. The hollow revealed itself as a cleft in the rock face, veiled by overhanging boughs heavy with ice. Thorn pushed aside a lattice of frozen vines, revealing a shallow cave mouth etched with faded runes, wolf motifs intertwined with lunar crescents, relics of a time when their worlds might have allied under the Deusa's gaze. Inside, the air hung still and heavy, scented with damp earth and the faint char of long-extinguished hearths. He gestured for her to enter first, a chivalric instinct that surprised her, his broad frame blocking the entrance like a sentinel. Ilara slipped past, the space confining yet oddly intimate, walls glistening with hoarfrost that caught the moon's light in prismatic shards. She sank against the stone, the cold seeping through her tattered gown, but Thorn's presence warded it off like a living flame. He kindled a small fire with flint from his pouch, the sparks dancing like defiant stars before catching on dry tinder. Flames licked upward, casting flickering shadows that played across his features. High cheekbones scarred by old battles, a jaw set in melancholic resolve. The fire's warmth coaxed color back into her cheeks, thawing the numbness that had settled in her limbs. He sat across from her, close enough that the heat of his body mingled with the blaze, his wound now a dull throb under the makeshift bandage. Silence stretched between them, broken only by the crackle of wood and the distant weavos that prowled the night like restless spirits. Ilara's fingers traced the amulet, its ruby glowing softly in the firelight, reflecting the crimson petals of blood on the snow outside their mind's eye. "You fight alone," she said at last, her voice a whisper laced with curiosity and the edge of accusation. "A king, yet no pack shadows your steps. What guilt drives you to this exile within exile?" Thorn's eyes met hers over the flames, golden depths swirling with the weight of unspoken oaths. He poked at the fire, sending embers spiraling upward like prayers to the moon. "The Iron Fang clans. They fracture under whispers of betrayal. My brother's hand, seeking the throne through alliances with your shadow courts." His words carried the bitterness of frostbitten regret, each syllable a confession carved from stone. "I spared a raid, chose mercy for a vampiric envoy bearing your people's seal. It cost lives. Now they hunt me as a traitor, same as your kin hunt you." He glanced at the amulet, its light mirroring the fire's dance. That trinket, it marks you as one of them, yet you bind my wounds instead of tearing them wider. Empathy bloomed in her chest, unbidden and fierce, like the first thaw after endless winter. She saw it then, the parallel wounds. His guilt for a mercy that sowed discord, her rejection for a compassion that defied bloodlust. The Deuce's trials indeed, forging bonds in the crucible of shared pain. Mercy is no weakness, she murmured, the philosophy slipping from her lips like a lunar incantation. It is the strength to see the soul beneath the fang. What is power, if not the choice to heal rather than conquer? Her hand extended across the fire, not touching, but offering, a bridge over the chasm of their worlds. He hesitated, rationalizing the pull that drew him closer, his ethical core warring with the king's duty to his fractured realm. The bond resisted, a rational denial of the instinctive spark, yet it deepened in the fire's glow. Thorn's fingers brushed hers, the contact electric, sending warmth coursing through her like liquid starlight. In that touch, fear softened to trust, curiosity to a tentative alliance. The amulet warmed against her skin, its ruby pulsing in time with their mingled breaths, as if the blood within it sealed the vow. But the night was not done with them. A low growl echoed from the tree line, followed by the snap of branches. Hunters, drawn by the scent of blood and fire. Thorn tensed, rising with a predator's grace despite his injury, his hand shifting to the dagger at his belt. Alara stood beside him, fangs bared not in hunger, but defense, her violet eyes gleaming with newfound resolve. The common enemy loomed, her court's assassins perhaps, or his traitorous kin, converging on the borderland's fragile peace. They faced the darkness together, backs to the fire, the amulet's light a defiant ruby heart in the encroaching shadow. The wind howled anew, carrying the promise of blood under the moon. But in that moment, empathy had forged a bond unbreakable as iron. Two exiles protecting the fragile spark of redemption amid the storm. What was destiny, if not this choice? To stand as one, or fall divided by the sins of their blood? The shadows lunged from the tree line like vengeful specters, their forms twisting under the blood moon's crimson pallor. Alara's fangs extended instinctively, a sharp ache in her gums as the cold night air filled with the metallic tang of impending violence. Thorn positioned himself before her, his body a bulwark of furred muscle and scarred resolve, the dagger in his grip glinting like a shard of frozen moonlight. The fire at their backs crackled defiantly, casting elongated silhouettes that danced across the cave mouth, two exiles bound by fragile threads, facing the storm of their intertwined fates. The first assailant burst forth, a hulking figure cloaked in midnight leathers, eyes gleaming with the feral red of vampiric thralls, her court's hunters, dispatched to erase the blemish of her mercy. Their blades whispered through the air, aimed not just at her, but at the alpha who dared shelter a shadow princess. Thorn met the charge with a guttural snarl, his free hand shifting seamlessly into claws that raked across the attacker's throat, spilling hot blood that steamed against the snow. The scent hit Ilara like a wave, stirring the hunger she had long suppressed, but she channeled it into motion, her lithe form blurring to intercept another foe. Her nails, sharpened by desperation, tore through leather and flesh, a visceral rip that echoed the tearing of her own exiled soul. Yet numbers pressed against them. 5, perhaps 6, shadows multiplying in the moon's deceptive light. A blade grazed Thorn's shoulder, reopening his wound, and he staggered, blood blooming fresh across the bandage she had tied. Pain lanced through Alara's chest, not her own, but his. A phantom echo that made her gasp, the amulet at her throat flaring with an intensity that seared her skin. What sorcery was this? The ruby pulsed like a second heart, its warmth spreading through her veins, coiling toward the point where their earlier touch had lingered. She clutched it, the silver biting into her palm, as the world tilted in a haze of crimson and gold. One hunter broke through, his fangs bared in a hiss of triumph, lunging for her throat with the precision of court-trained killers. Time fractured. Ilara felt the air displace, the cold wind of his approach brushing her cheek like a lover's fatal breath. But deeper, within her, something stirred, a dormant fire, lunar and ancient, ignited by the amulet's insistent glow. Her blood sang, not with the eternal thirst of her kin, but with a hidden cadence. The Deuce's forgotten gift, woven into the royal line but suppressed by centuries of shadowed conquests. It was the Pathfinder's vein, whispered in forbidden scrolls, a rare essence that could bind wounds not just of flesh, but of fate itself, revealing paths where destiny forked like lightning-cracked stone. The attacker's fangs grazed her shoulder, drawing a thin line of her blood that welled dark and iridescent under the moon. But as it trickled free, the amulet ignited fully, its ruby exploding in a burst of ethereal light that bathed the fray in ruby-tinged silver. Ilara's vision sharpened, not to the kill, but to truths veiled. Visions cascaded through her mind. Thorn's past unspooling like a tapestry of guilt, his brother's betrayal in the Iron Fang halls, a poisoned chalice under the full moon that had slain allies and fractured the packs. She saw her own exile mirrored, the council's chants, her father's averted gaze, the Deuce's whisper urging her toward this borderland convergence. And deeper still, the bond, the Alpha's bite, not yet given but foretold, a salvation that would doom their realms by forging an unbreakable link, blood to blood, wolf to shadow. No, she breathed, the word a command born of revelation. Her hand shot out, not to strike, but to seize the hunter's wrist, her bloodied fingers pressing against his skin. The gift manifested in a rush, her vitae flowing not as poison, but as luminous threads that snaked into his veins, unraveling the compulsion of her court's dark rites. He convulsed, eyes widening in shock as memories flooded him, his own lost humanity, the chains of servitude that bound him to the obsidian thrones. With a guttural cry, he collapsed, not dead, but freed, rolling into the snow with a dazed gasp, the red gleam fading from his gaze. Thorn whirled, dispatching another foe with a swipe that sent blood arcing like crimson rain, but his golden eyes locked on her, wide with dawning awe. The remaining hunters faltered, sensing the shift. The air hummed with her power, the amulet's light weaving protective wards that shimmered like auroral veils. One by one, they turned, fleeing into the night with howls that twisted from aggression to fear, the blood moon witnessing the unveiling of the exiled princess's true inheritance. Ilara sank to her knees, the visions receding like ebbing tides, leaving her trembling in the fire's dying glow. Her shoulder throbbed, but the wound knit itself slowly, her blood's gift turning inward now, a self-healing born of lunar grace. Thorn dropped beside her, his breath ragged, hands hovering as if afraid to touch the enigma before him. The cave's confines felt sacred now, walls etched with runes that seemed to pulse in sympathy with the amulet. "What are you?" he murmured, voice thick with the weight of realization. His fingers brushed the ruby, and a jolt passed between them. Visions shared, fleeting, their kingdoms entwined, the blood bond as both curse and salvation, her essence the key to mending his fractured packs, revealing traitors and paths to unity that no Alpha's howl could chart alone. Ilara met his gaze, violet depths swirling with the storm of her awakening. The gift had always slumbered within, a compassion veiled as weakness, now revealed as destiny's forge. "The Deuce's pathfinder," she whispered, the words tasting of ancient truths. "My blood sees what shadows hide, bonds unbroken, fates reclaimed. You are part of it, Thorn. The bite that saves, the link that dooms." Fear and wonder warred in her, the rational denial of their pull cracking under the weight of certainty. He was no mere wounded king. She was no broken exile. Together, they held the thread to redemption, fragile as frost-laced silk, yet unbreakable as the moon's eternal vigil. The wind sighed outside, carrying the distant weavos of retreating shadows, while the fire popped softly, embers mirroring the spark of their shared revelation. In that intimate silence, Thorn's hand found hers, the touch sealing what visions had unveiled. She was the key, and he, the lock turned by blood under the unrelenting sky. Subscribe if you believe mercy can crown even the fallen. The blood moon hung low, its crimson light bleeding into the horizon like an open wound that refused to close. Ilara stood at the cave's threshold, the amulet's ruby still thrumming against her chest, a relentless heartbeat echoing the turmoil within. The visions from her awakening lingered like frostbite on her soul. Thorn's fractured kingdom, her own shadowed court, and the inexorable bond that would either mend or shatter them both. She glanced at him, his golden eyes reflecting the dying fire's embers, a king's resolve hardening amid the guilt that had carved him hollow. The night pressed in, heavy with the scent of pine and iron, the wind whispering of pursuits closing in from both their worlds. They emerged into the pre-dawn chill, the snowdrifts sculpted into treacherous waves under the moon's gaze. Thorn's limp had eased, her pathfinder's touch weaving subtle strength into his veins, but the wound at his side wept anew, a crimson reminder of the price of mercy. "We can't hide forever," he murmured, his voice a gravelly timbre that cut through the wind's lament. "My brother's scent trails us, Ragnar, the traitor who poisoned the chalice of unity. He's rallied the rival packs, whispering that my mercy toward your kind dooms the Iron Fangs." His hand brushed the blackened iron circlet in his hair, tarnished symbol of a throne now contested, its weight a mirror to her amulet's burden. Ilara's violet eyes scanned the shadowed peaks, her senses heightened by the gift that now coursed through her like lunar fire. She felt the pull of her court's hunters, their undead steps silent as falling snow, drawn by the amulet's flare, a beacon betraying her survival. The Deuce's whisper urged her forward, not to flee, but to confront, the past as a forge where rejection birthed reckoning. "And my father," she replied, her breath fogging the air like unspoken regrets. "The Obsidian Council sees my exile as incomplete. They come to sever the thread before it binds what they fear, a bridge between night and howl." Her fingers tightened around the ruby, its warmth a defiant pulse against the cold that clawed at her tattered gown. What was freedom, if not the liberty to choose chains of the heart over the solitude of shadows? The confrontation unfolded at the Frostvale Pass, a narrow gorge where ancient runes scarred the ice walls. Wolf and fang intertwined with vampiric crescents, relics of pacts sundered by ambition. The wind howled through the chasm like the Deuce's anguished cry, carrying the distant thunder of paws and the rustle of cloaked figures. Thorn halted, his body tensing as silhouettes crested the ridge. A vanguard of Ironfang warriors, their furred cloaks rimed with frost, eyes glowing feral under the moon. At their fore rode Ragnar, Thorn's brother, astride a massive direwolf steed, his frame leaner but no less commanding, scars twisting his face into a mask of righteous fury. Flanking him were the rival Alphas, shadowy lords from the Stormclaw and Bloodridge clans, their alliances forged in betrayal's fire. From the opposite flank slithered the vampiric contingent, led by High Priestess Lyrian, her robes a cascade of midnight silk, eyes burning with the red zeal of enforced purity. Her father's absence stung like salt in a vein. He who had condemned her, now sending proxies to erase the evidence of his doubt. "Sister of the night," Lyrian intoned, her voice a silken venom carried on the breeze. "Your tainted light profanes the Deuce's thirst. Return the amulet, or we unmake you." The hunters fanned out, blades glinting like icicles, their presence a wall of cold disdain that mirrored the pack's snarling ranks. Thorn stepped forward, his presence a bulwark, claws extending with a low growl that vibrated the snow. "Ragnar," he called, the name laced with the ache of fraternal ruin. "You twist mercy into treason for a crown stained with our kin's blood. The pacts fracture not by my hand, but yours, alliances with shadow courts that drain our lands dry." Ragnar's laugh echoed, bitter as wind-scoured stone, his steed pawing the ground. "Mercy? You spared their envoy, brother, and now consort with their exile. The Deusa demands war, not this. Weakness." The rival alphas murmured assent, their howls rising in a chorus that shook loose avalanches of powder from the peaks. Alara's heart pounded, the amulet flaring as visions cascaded anew. Ragnar's hand tipping the poisoned chalice, Lyrian's chants weaving illusions of divine wrath to mask political games. The blood bond loomed in her mind's eye, Thorn's bite. A desperate act to save her from a fatal strike, forging a link that would unite their essences but ignite the kingdoms in holy war. Love or freedom? The dilemma clawed at her, raw and visceral, the wind whipping her hair like chains. To embrace him meant dooming the fragile peace, their union a spark to powder kegs of ancient hatreds. Forgiveness might heal the pacts, expose the traitors, but at what cost to her shadowed heritage? War promised survival through separation, yet the Deusa's path whispered of renascimento through sacrifice. A rival alpha lunged first, a stormclaw brute charging with axe raised, his roar splitting the night. Thorn met him mid-stride, bodies colliding in a blur of fur and fang, blood spraying across the snow in scarlet arcs that steamed under the moon. Ilara blurred into the fray, her gift surging as she intercepted Lyrian's hunter, her bloodied palm pressing to his chest. Luminous threads unraveled his loyalty, visions flooding him with truths of the Council's deceptions, raids not for purity, but power. He faltered, turning on his kin with a cry of betrayal, the chaos rippling outward. Ragnar dismounted, dagger drawn, circling Thorn as brothers clashed in a dance of grief and steel. "Choose, brother," he snarled, blade nicking Thorn's arm, drawing blood that called to Alara's veins like a siren's song. "The pacts or this shadow whore?" Thorn parried, golden eyes flashing with ethical torment, the guilt of past mercies fueling his strikes. Ilara wove through the melee, the amulet guiding her to Ragnar's side, her touch grazing his sleeve. A vision pierced him. His own ambition, born of fear, not fury, the Deusa's trial for all who wielded power without compassion. The priestess struck then, her ritual blade aimed at Alara's heart, the air humming with dark incantations. Thorn roared, shoving her aside, but the edge grazed her throat, blood welling hot and swift. In that instant, instinct overrode denial. The bond demanded completion. His fangs sank into her shoulder, not to claim, but to save, his saliva mingling with her vitae in a rush of fire and ice. Pain bloomed, exquisite and binding, her gift amplifying the link, their minds entwined, sharing the weight of guilt, the map of betrayals laid bare. Ragnar staggered, visions assaulting him through the ethereal connection. Lyrian hissed, her wards shattering as truths exposed her manipulations. The warriors faltered, packs and hunters alike, reeling from the revelations. Traitors unmasked, alliances crumbling like hoarfrost. Alara pulled away, the bite's mark throbbing with newfound unity, her blood singing of paths untrodden. But the cost loomed. Kingdoms doomed by this intimacy, wars ignited by the forbidden merge of wolf and shadow. Thorn met her gaze, breath ragged, the moral precipice stark between them. Forgiveness or war? Love's redemption or freedom's lonely vigil? The wind howled its query, the moon bearing witness to the choice that would define their souls, mercy as the crown, or separation as the grave. In his eyes, she saw the reflection of her own torn heart, the Deuce's whisper urging, "What is strength, if not embracing the doom that heals?" The blood moon's crimson gaze fractured across the Frostvale Pass, splintering into 1,000 ruby shards on the ice-sheathed walls, as if the Deusa herself wept for the choices etched in frost and fang. Alara's shoulder throbbed where Thorn's bite had sealed their fates, a searing brand that pulsed in rhythm with the amulet's relentless glow. Her blood, once a solitary river of shadowed eternity, now coursed with his essence, wild, earthy, laced with the primal howl of iron-fang winds. The pain was exquisite, a velvet fire that blurred the boundaries of her soul, weaving his guilt into her exile's ache, his ethical torment into her compassionate core. She staggered back from the fray, the snow yielding beneath her like a reluctant confessor, her violet eyes locking onto his amid the chaos of faltering warriors and unraveling illusions. Ragnar knelt in the crimson-streaked drifts, his dagger limp in a bloodied hand. Visions from the bond assaulting him like lunar tempests, truths of his poisoned ambitions laid bare, the Deusa's judgment stripping away the veneer of righteous fury. The rival alphas howled in confusion, their packs fracturing as shared glimpses revealed the web of betrayals. Lyrian's chants, not divine but deceitful, binding hunters to a council's greed rather than the moon's will. The priestess herself recoiled, her ritual blade clattering to the ice, her red eyes widening in horror as Alara's gift pierced the veil, exposing the raids as power plays, not purifications. One by one, the assailants turned, vampiric thralls shaking off compulsion, iron-fang warriors snarling at their false lords, until the pass echoed with the raw cacophony of awakening, howls mingling with hisses under the unrelenting sky. Yet victory tasted of ash and iron, the wind whipping through the gorge like the Deusa's mournful sigh, carrying the metallic tang of spilled blood that steamed in the cold. Thorn stood over Ragnar, his claws retracted, golden eyes stormy with the weight of fraternal ruin. No killing blow fell, instead he extended a hand. Scarred and trembling, the ethical heart of a king choosing mercy over the throne's cold demand. "Rise, brother," he rasped, voice thick with the melancholy that had shadowed him through endless winters. "The packs need unity, not another grave. Forgive, or exile yourself to the truths you've sown." Ragnar's gaze lifted, fractured pride yielding to the bond's inexorable pull, a nod sealing his surrender, not death, but redemption's harsh forge. Alara watched, the amulet's ruby warming her chest like a second dawn, its light weaving ethereal threads that bound the pass in fragile peace. The bite's link hummed between her and Thorn, intimate and visceral, sharing flashes of their inner tempests. Her father's distant silhouette in the obsidian halls, his unspoken regret for condemning the daughter who dared empathy. Thorn's memories of the envoy he spared, a vampiric herald whose words of alliance had planted the seeds of his guilt. The connection was no gentle union, but a storm-tossed revelation. Love as trial, not balm, demanding they confront the doom it wrought. Their kingdoms, long sundered by blood feuds, now teetered on the edge of cataclysm, the bond's existence a beacon that would rally purists and traitors alike, igniting wars where wolf packs clashed with shadow courts in a frenzy of ancient hatreds. Whispers would spread from this pass, of a princess bitten, an alpha enthralled, dooming fragile borders to flames and frost. She stepped closer, the snow crunching like brittle bones under her bare feet, the cold no longer a torment, but a clarifying bite that sharpened her resolve. Thorn turned to her, his broad frame silhouetted against the moon's descent, fur cloak ragged and bloodied, yet his presence a hearth in the void. The rational denial that had armored her heart cracked fully now, the instinctive pull accepted in the quiet philosophy of their shared gaze. What was love if not this? A redemption forged in sacrifice, where freedom's solitary path yielded to the compassionate chain of destiny. "The bond dooms us," she whispered, her voice a silken thread amid the wind's howl, fingers tracing the bite's mark, warm and insistent. Our worlds will burn for it, councils will chant my name as curse, pacts will howl yours as betrayal. Yet in this link, I see the Deusa's path, not conquest, but healing through the fire we ignite. Thorn's hand cupped her face, calloused thumb brushing a frozen tear from her lash, the touch sending waves of lunar fire through their veins. His eyes, molten gold under the ebbing crimson light, held no regret, only the melancholic acceptance of a king who had long carried wounds too deep for solitude. "Then we face the blaze together," he murmured, the words a vow etched in blood and breath. "Your gift reveals the traitors. My strength guards the mercy we've chosen, not as ruler and exile, but as one soul, reborn in the Deusa's trial. Power without compassion is chains, ours breaks them, even if it costs the thrones we never truly wanted." The pass fell silent, the wind softening to a reverent hush as warriors from both sides lowered weapons, the bond's aura rippling outward like ripples on a frozen lake. Ragnar rose, offering allegiance with a bowed head. Lyrian fled into the shadows, her deceptions exposed, a harbinger of the reckonings to come. Ilara leaned into Thorn's embrace, the amulet pressing between them, its ruby dimming to a steady ember as if sated by their union. Tenderness bloomed in the pain, the heat of his body chasing the eternal chill from her bones, her blood's glow easing the guilt that had hollowed his gaze. They turned from the gorge, hand in hand, toward the Whispering Peak's heart, where temples of ice and lunar stone awaited the proclamation of their forbidden alliance. The blood moon sank, yielding to the pale promise of dawn, its light lingering on the snow like a lover's parting kiss. In that Renascimento, rejection transmuted to destiny, exile to empire of the heart, guilt to grace. The kingdoms might doom themselves in rage, but in their bond, redemption endured. A flame kindled against the endless night. What was strength, if not choosing the doom that healed, the love that proved the soul's true crown? If your heart beat alongside ours, like, comment, and subscribe. Because every soul that joins our moon keeps the flame of redemption alive.